Listen, One Punch Man is back and ya boy is too. Best believe it hurt terribly not being able to cover the previous chapter personally, but hopefully we can make up for it with this one. And oh man, did One Punch Man chapter 167 have a lot to live up to. With chapter 166 dropping bombshell after bombshell, and Saitama's confrontation with a seemingly unstoppable Garo reaching its apex, it was sure to be a hard one to follow up, but man did it deliver. The cover page of this chapter provided an absolutely insane shot of Saitama and Garo poised to strike against the backdrop of an outer space atmosphere. This gives us a clue as to where this fight is headed, along with the words opposing each other, polar opposite fists. But jumping into the contents, we immediately see Blast using his dimensional manipulation to move them all into outer space as their battle rushes to a crescendo. This is a last-ditch attempt to keep Garo and Saitama from destroying the Earth, which he feared they would after the events of the last chapter showed him just how much these two are capable of. And hey, with Blast now fully aware of just how powerful Saitama truly is, our video theorizing the potential of attempted recruitment looks all the more promising. However, even the sudden efforts of the Hero Association's #1 S-Class hero seems to merely be a band-aid solution. Garo and Saitama simultaneously launch Saitama's serious punch against one another, resulting in a collision of virtually incomprehensible force dubbed Serious Punch Squared. This cosmically cataclysmic clash caused an absolutely massive explosion just above the vulnerable planet. This sent Blast, who would appear invulnerable to both the vacuum of space and its lack of oxygen, into a panic, considering to himself mentally that his warp gate couldn't possibly handle the fallout of their confrontation. He fears that he can't keep them far enough away from the Earth and resolves to divert the energy of the fight away from the Earth's surface by any means necessary. But just as he is in the midst of making that observation, a shadowy figure appears beside him, stating that we underestimated Earth. But you know what you shouldn't underestimate? The amount of awesome plot armor content you could have in your life by hitting subscribe and notifications on to never miss an upload. And don't forget to serious punch the like button. This man and the two other mysterious figures beside him look to be members of Blast's group. We last saw him in the replaced version of chapter 164, which has now been retconned, but since his design is the same, it is likely he is the same guy. That being said, the one member of this collective which we had seen in her entirety may have been altered somewhat here, as at the very least, her hair is no longer kept back in the same way it once was. The underestimation of the Earth was previously provided by the lion-like creature, but considering the circumstance behind that original conversation has been altered, we may instead just generally presume they didn't expect much from Earth combatively as a collective. As they assemble behind him, one of them is amazed that a human hero besides Blast could keep up with someone as divinely gifted as Garo in a fight, and wonders who Saitama is. They then offer their help to Blast and extend their hands behind him. The relief on Blast's face when he recognizes them makes me think that their help was much needed. And mind you, as opposed to the many visages previously on display in both the original version of chapter 164 and the group's original tease in chapter 156, here we only have the three members that have been shown the most backing Blast up. The others may then be presumed to be keeping God at bay. Together, the four of them deflect the energy of Garo and Saitama's attacks away from the Earth, creating a ray of energy that seemingly obliterates everything in its path. Now, along with this visual, we receive a new look at Earth's moon, which is rather unsettling. At first glance, one may presume this to be the impact caused by Boros previously sending Saitama crashing into the surface. However, this is actually the dark side of the moon, which appears to have an entirely different crater with what looks to be like a spinal protrusion in the pit of it. This is terrifying. And speaking of terrifying, there aren't even any stars left in the distance where the energy has traveled, an amount of power that is difficult for me to even comprehend. Given that the nearest stars to Earth are 4¼ light years away, as in, if you were to move at the speed of light, it would take you 4 years and 4 months to reach one, the energy it would have taken to obliterate them is absolutely unreal, and multiple of them, multiple suns we are talking about here. And subsequently, an innumerable amount of solar systems that have subsequently been extinguished instantaneously. When One Punch Man raises the stakes, it raises them to absolutely insane heights. Now mind you, scientifically, even if these stars were destroyed, they would still be observable in this way, as our observance is merely on account of the traversal of their light to the point of visibility. Ergo, the light they display is from at least 4.3 years ago if we are going by Alpha Centauri, which is the closest star system to our own. But who cares, it's cool. After deflecting the energy vector away from the Earth, Blast and his companions wonder what happened to Garo and Saitama. One notes that they could have been thrown a great distance away by the recoil of their own attacks, and indeed they have been. Garo seems to have been thrown into the surface of a planetoid, which we will soon be able to better identify, causing a massive explosion on impact. I'd hate to see the size of that crater. But if that hurt him at all, he barely shows it, getting up before the dust even settles. Just after that, Saitama makes a crash landing as well, getting to his feet on an elevated plateau above the crater that Garo's landing created. His cape and costume are torn, but he still hasn't let go of Genos' core, which he clutches in his hand as Garo looks on from below. And here we get yet another absolutely epic shot that Murata has colored. Here we have Garo glowing purplish blue looking up at the silhouette of Saitama, who stands above him beneath the swirling visuals of the largest planet in our solar system, the gas giant known as Jupiter. Therefore identifying them to be on one of the planet's 79 moons, which we will be able to further identify momentarily. The positioning of Saitama being so far above Garo that only his silhouette is visible is very telling of Saitama's superiority. After that epic shot, we cut to another that gives us a better idea of the moon that we are presently on. This is Io, the fourth largest moon in our entire solar system, simultaneously boasting the greatest surface gravity of them all. And so to even move on this bad boy is a major feat in and of itself, which only makes the proceedings of this chapter that much more spectacular. Saitama expresses confusion not knowing where he is and says that the place makes him feel deja vu, of course referring to his prior situation against Boros. Yet it would seem that Boros was so beneath him in power that proper recollection isn't even afforded to the occurrence. Also, Saitama is speaking and not holding his breath at all, which further emphasizes the point that despite holding his nose comically in the past, he never actually needed to. Garo, meanwhile, being the educated young man that he is, speculates that the planet nearest to them is Jupiter, but doesn't understand how that could have come to be. It seems to bother Saitama far less though, as he can now go all out without fear of destroying the planet he lives on. But perhaps even more fascinating than that, here, Saitama mentions the fact that he can actually go full power against someone who can take his hits, which is a really big deal. His acknowledgement of this is absolutely monumental. But like before, Garo continues to be more skeptical and rattled than Saitama. He is so shocked by Saitama's calmness that he begins to question whether or not he's even human. Meanwhile, a pensive Saitama realizes that he has finally found what he wanted, a fight with a worthy opponent. But it doesn't feel nearly as good as he thought it would. This is everything Saitama longed for at the beginning of the series, but he now finds it to be empty. One Punch Man is of course largely a parody of shonen stories, yet I find this particular subversion of the main character's climactic accomplishment of their dream to be especially compelling. Saitama tries to put Genos' core in his costume, but decides against it, since it would fall out if he ripped up his suit any more than he already has. Instead, he decides to hold it in his free hand. And so even in the case of his greatest challenge yet, or perhaps his only challenge yet, Saitama is going in with a self-imposed restriction. But considering that it is all he has left of his closest friend, it's not exactly surprising that he'd do anything to avoid dropping it. Garo though has other concerns. He tells Saitama that he thinks they've landed on one of Jupiter's moons and asks him to help him figure out a way to get back to Earth, but Saitama interrupts him, telling him to shut up. That he is not going to think about going home until he has given Garo the beating he deserves. Still holding on to Genos' core, Saitama tells Garo that he only needs one hand to beat him. And this right here is one of the most badass Saitama moments of all time, as he challenges the most formidable monster the world has ever seen to a fight with only one hand. And even more than that, he is protecting Genos' core, so he has to avoid damage there. And this seems to snap Garo back into battle mode as well, as he creates a portal beneath Saitama. But it doesn't do much. Saitama simply kicks it away like a soccer ball. It's pretty hard to overstate how absolutely insane that is, and Garo is visibly and understandably shocked. That moment of surprise gives Saitama time to land a vicious hit to Garo's face that launches the man-turned-monster far out into space. Not easily knocked out, Garo creates another portal to launch himself back to the surface of the moon. But when he tries to attack, Saitama grabs hold of the gate and yanks it into the perfect spot for him to land a brutal hit to the underside of his chin. This man Saitama is casually grabbing onto literal holes in space and time, then firmly planting Garo into the ground beneath him. Unimpressed with his opponent's performance, Saitama taunts Garo, asking if these attacks are all there is to his ultimate martial arts, and deservingly calls his moves tricks. Garo, though, is a lot more worried about the fact that Saitama can grab his portals than he is about defending himself from those taunts. You know, as one should be. This is far from a funny chapter, but you gotta appreciate the humor created by juxtaposing Saitama's dead serious calmness in the face of unbelievable power with Garo's completely logical worry. Even so, Garo does manage to spare the attention to be offended by that, telling Saitama that he has copied numerous styles of martial arts and is able to use them all together to deadly effect. That, and not any trick he says, is his true power. And he shows it off by launching himself between portal after portal, winding up for an ultimate attack. Roaring aura sky ripping. Water stream rock smashing, exploding heart release, whirlwind iron cutting, nuclear fission, gravity knuckle. And you know, it is really easy to forget that this is a parody manga until you go and take the trope of calling out the names of attacks to the most ridiculous level possible. Anyways, fittingly for an attack with such a mouthful of a name, Garo's ultimate punch manages to land a few blows on Saitama, and it culminates in an explosion whose scale is difficult to comprehend. The surface of the moon is obscured by massive clouds of dust as Garo explains that his attacks are unavoidable because they come from all directions at the same time, to which Saitama replies that he can do that too. Even though his costume seems to have been totally destroyed by Garo's whirlwind, Saitama still holds tight to Genos' core, and he kneels down to embed his available hand into the surface of the moon in preparation for his counterattack. The ground will begin to collapse in Garo's direction. This is serious table flip. Something webcomic fans have been eagerly awaiting for a while now. Just a few fingers beneath the ground allows Saitama to create a fissure that ripped through the moon's surface in ways more devastating than even the greatest of earthquakes. An absolutely colossal wall of debris rises in front of Garo, who is visibly in awe of the power of Saitama's attack, and it isn't long before the moon's surface is completely torn to rubble. Io is no more. That is some table flip. The proceeding throws Garo into the air, discombobulating him so badly that he can't even properly orient himself, which is bad news because Saitama has more coming. Using the flying chunks of debris, he launches himself in all directions so quickly that he creates after images in preparation for his responsive attack. This is omnidirectional serious punch. Garo tries to use a portal to escape and is shocked to see Saitama rising through the portal beside him, only to punch him straight through it. Saitama's punch sends him flying into a field of airborne debris, ricocheting off chunks of rocks at such great speeds that he cannot stop. The momentum is so great, in fact, that it makes the previous visual phenomenon created by the three-way fight between Garo, Platinum-S, and Flashy Flash look like a parlor trick. In this colored shot, Garo pinballs with such incredible speeds that he essentially maps the debris back into a vaguely spherical shape. I mean, these feats are getting harder and harder to track. However, Garo manages to pull himself together eventually, forcing himself to focus by telling himself that Saitama's attacks, albeit insane, are still rather simple. As far as Garo is concerned, he is only showing off right now, and as long as he can get above the fields of rocks, Saitama will lose his only way of moving around and be unable to continue chasing him. But when he tries to ward to the surface, Garo finds that he has lost all sense of direction, similarly to a caged insect rattled by a child. And that vulnerability allows Saitama to sneak up and land another serious punch onto him. But that does not stop Garo, who is sure he can beat even a limitlessly strong opponent as long as he copies his techniques. He once again dons Saitama's facial features and prepares to attack. With that, Saitama and Garo both land hits that have the other spewing what at first looks like blood. But this is a visual we have seen in regards to Saitama before without it actually being the case, and so I am still not convinced the guy has drawn blood. Goodness gracious, what a phenomenal chapter of One Punch Man this was, and boy does it feel good to be back. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.